Hi, Book 2. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner, and it's time for another 7 on Sunday. And the topic is most read authors. I did struggle with this one because I couldn't remember which authors I read the most of, and now there were obvious ones that came to mind. So hopefully this is accurate to the authors read the most from. I remember Goodreads used to have a category on your shelves of most read authors, but they got rid of that for some reason. That's kind of, I didn't like that because I really liked it. I really liked going to that section, that shelf, and looking at my most read authors. Especially when I first joined BookTube or started watching BookTube, so I can keep track of the authors that I've been wanting to read. I've been wanting to read more from, and like paying attention to ones that I read the most from, especially for videos like these. Okay, so here are my 7 most read authors. Okay, first is Charles Dickens. And he might not be the author altogether that I read the most of, but I've read quite a bit. So I've read a collection of his short stories, mostly Christmas stories, I think. But I have a complicated relationship with short stories because sometimes I like them, but oftentimes they feel like parts of larger work, like a bit of a longer story. So it's hard for me to really get into them and embrace them, and that's how I felt about Dickens' short stories, and maybe that's partly to do with I'm used to now reading his longer works. Although I love Christmas Carol, which that one I have reread 3 times now. But it's been part of my life for a long time. I watch the Christmas Carol, one of the adaptations every year. And my dad was in a production of it at the local community theater in our old hometown. He was the Ghost of Christmas Present. Like I watched the I've never really watched the black and white one all the way through, but I watched Mickey's Christmas Carol. I watched the computer generated one where starring Jim Carrey, which that was okay. The only thing really special was Jim Carrey does a really good performance, which he always does in my opinion, and it's computer generated, so that was a really big thing the last 5-10 years. And then I love Christmas Carol musical, the one with Kelsey Grammer, Jesse L. Martin, Jane Krakowski. I can never figure out how to say her last name. And Geraldine Chaplin is also in it, and also actually this was the movie where I first discovered that Jennifer Love Hewitt can sing. Which actually shouldn't really surprise me because most actors can carry a tune at least. But anyway, and the music always gets me emotional in that one, especially the main theme. I cannot remember what it's called. But I always get emotional with the songs from that. And of course, if you grew up in the 90s, you saw Muppet Christmas Carol. And I think that's. Oh, and then I've seen bits and pieces of Patrick Stewart's version, where he plays Scrooge. But anyway, so I've read Great Expectations. I've read Oliver Twist. I've been wanting to reread Oliver Twist. I read Tale of Two Sydneys was the first Dickens I ever read, and I absolutely fell in love with it. There are some issues about it, like at the time it's one of the ones that shows how he had trouble writing female characters. And then Bleak House I love, and I am currently trying to reread it, but I keep going back and forth between rereading that, picking that one up, and maybe reading one of his works, Dickens' works that I have not read. Like I haven't read Dombey and Son, but I did start that one, and I've read and I started reading Our Mutual Friend, which is Katie from Books and Things' favorite Dickens. And then I read The Chimes last year around winter time. I don't know if I read it during Christmas or not. It might have been after Christmas. Yeah, I think it might have been after Christmas when I finally got around to reading it. Like, I meant to read it before Christmas or close to Christmas, but I never got around to it. And then next year, I hope to read, or either this year or going the beginning of next year, I want to read The Haunted Man. Um, which times is okay. It was interesting. I read Hard Times, which explores some interesting themes. Um, Not my favorite though. And then I read The Old Curiosity Shop. Cannot stand that one. Was a little too sentimental even for me. But I did think the relationship between the little girl and her grandfather was really sweet. I did like that. And of course, some of his characters were just like Dickens' characters, just sometimes likable. They're exaggerated characters, but they're still likable. Even when they're just okay. Um, and then let's see what's. And I think that's all the ones I've read. There's probably more. There's probably like one that I forgot. But and David Copperfield. I read David Copperfield. Which I would love to get the cloth bound edition of David Copperfield. I don't know if I've seen it. I read on occasion there have been a few. There have been a couple of cloth bound editions at My Books a Million. But mostly I've only seen them at at Barnes and Noble, and then, I've seen them online. And I'm able to get some of them off thrift books. Like I got two. Actually, no, I bought the Odyssey from BAM. That was one of the few rare times where I've actually got a cloth bound. That was my first cloth bound, actually. But I got Sense and Sensibility off of thrift books. The cloth bound edition. But I wanted to get some more cloth bound editions, and I spotted David Copperfield cloth bound edition. But the problem is the cloth bounds are, because they're hardback, they're kind of pricey. So it's almost like you could only get one. You can get more than one if you want to, but it does cost quite a bit, quite a pretty penny. Not like $100 or anything, but 30 to 40, cost range, money range. And I love David Copperfield. I did watch the movie adaptation, which was pretty good. But Dickens, like some other author, he's one of the many authors who writes really long books. So it's like having to condense them into a 2-hour movie. They take away a lot of stuff. So, okay, the next author is actually an author I have since walked away from because his stories after a while seem kind of repetitive. They seem to be about a lot of the same things every time, and that's F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, his writing style is great. I love his writing style. Although, maybe I should give credit to Zelda Fitzgerald, because I have heard recently how, and you've been here the last 10 years, you've been hearing this a lot, that maybe some of those eccentric artists, like painters and writers and, that maybe that their wives or their lovers are the ones who did the work, and they just and the guys just stole from them, marked it as their own. Of course, who knows? But I like his writing, but it's just the works kind of seem like he's writing a lot of the same things. So I've read a collection of short stories. I don't remember all of them. I've read Tender's the Night. That's one of his novels. And of course, I've read The Great Gatsby. The Beautiful and the Damned. I've read that one. Or no, actually did not read that. I thought about reading that one. I kept debating if I wanted to read it or not. But I decided to, donate and figure I'm not going to read it. I'm trying to think of there is one where about an actress and that kind of, and a producer, and kind of in a film noir, or he might have been a director, and it was a film noir type story. I cannot remember what it's called though, but I read Bernice. The short stories were Bernice Bobs Her Hair, A Diamond as Big as the Ritz, Mayday, Um, something pirate. There's one that was called Pirate something. Um, the Ice Palace. Um, there were a lot. I didn't read all. There was still a lot I hadn't read, but there was a good chunk that I had read. I just cannot remember all their titles because there were so many. Um, and actually, we're only, they say that our brain only can remember 7 things. So that's why your phone number is 7 numbers long, or your cell phone number. Also, any your phone or your phone number is why it's always 7 numbers long, because that's the most numbers we can remember, the most things we can remember. Um, I wish I remember what that one story is called, but like, it's just they kind of got boring after a while. Like I said, I love the writing, and I wish I could say I could appreciate Tenders and Night, but I can't. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. Maybe I just don't like depressing stories. Although that's not entirely true, but because I've read tragic historical stories, like Salt of the Sea, and the Diary of Anne Frank type stories. Although that one I think I read for school. But so that's Epscop's Trump. The next is Stephen King. Now this will be a little bit easier to remember his works that I've read. Okay, so let's see. With Stephen King, which I know a lot of people don't love Stephen King because he writes about things that some people are not comfortable with. He puts things into stories that are a little iffy, which I respect that if but I like his plots. Not everything, I'm not interested in everything he writes, but I do like his plots. And I do like horror, especially if it has a supernatural spin to it. And I've been wanting to get more into read more horror, and not just Stephen King horror, but other authors as well. So I tried to do that at the end of last year. So what I've read of Stephen King is I read Misery, which that was scary in a way that not like there's a monster necessarily or there's a ghost or whatever, but because it's kind of talking about how crazy fans can be, how crazy we can get, how obsessive we can get. Because this author decides to, this author, Paul Sheldon, he writes this series of historical mysteries or detective stories or something like that, and he decides to end it and kill off the main character. And while he's on the way, I don't remember where he was going, but he ends up crashing his car in a snowbank. And his number one fan, Annie Wilkes, finds him, and she was once a nurse, and so she takes him and decides to fix his leg. Then she remembers, but then because he killed her favorite character, this one is her favorite character. Misery is the character's name, actually, that's what the title refers to. She tells him, "You're not going anywhere until you write a better version, a story just for me about this character, and take back the fact that you killed her." So she keeps him hostage, and clearly she's crazy. So it's almost a commentary of how sometimes fans can get a little carried away. I mean, I don't think any of us would ever actually hold our favorite writer or favorite actor or singer hostage like that, but it was scary in a very different kind of way. Like, she wasn't she wasn't like the clown Pennywise, or like the ghost in The Shining, or even she was human. She was just a little unstable and passionate. But and some of his scariest works aren't about physical monsters, like they're about humans that act like monsters. So I've read 2 of his books I've got from the library. Some of the books I got from the library that I borrowed that I don't have a copy of are Everything's Eventual. I read all 14 of those stories. I read The Dark Half, which is about another story about a writer, and he creates an alter ego, and he writes these really dark stories, and then one day he decides he's done with this alter ego and this character, and with the encouragement from like his agents and stuff like that and his publishers, he decides to kill him off. And then somehow the character comes alive and decides he doesn't like that and decides to kill the people who encouraged this guy to kill off this character. And I think that was kind of inspired because someone outed Stephen King on his Richard Bachman pseudonym. So that inspired a story, which I think that's what a lot of writers, especially a lot of writers, especially that they will be inspired by things in their life experiences, or the people that they observe. So that was The Dark Half, and then I got Revival from. Actually, no. Well, first I originally borrowed it, but then I bought a copy of it. But then after I read it, I decided I didn't want to keep it because, I liked the story and all, but I probably wasn't going to reread it again. This one is essentially this guy. He talks about growing up, and he's now an adult. And there was a preacher in his life that had he was very magnetic, and he had a strong influence on the congregation. But then one day, his wife and son were killed, so he started to lose faith in God and wanted to know if there was an afterlife, and he became obsessed with proving that science is superior to believing in God. And as our main character is growing up, we know that this preacher is trying to figure that out and wants to do something crazy. And so it has some food for thought, and has an interesting concept. But it was weird. It felt like a Lifetime movie, but with the main character, but with a focus on male characters. So it was just okay. I read Lissy's Story, which became a TV show with starring Julianne Moore. But I don't know if I had access to that show. I don't think, I think it was on a streaming network that I didn't have, and I wasn't gonna, buy a subscribe to this streaming network just so I can watch this one thing. But that was about a grieving widow who she's still grieving after 2 years, and then it turns out that her husband has left some clues to what happened to him, and she discovers why he was a little unstable himself, and discovers this world he created, an actual place that he created, and these people are hunting her down because of this. It was another very emotional story about grief, and that's another thing he does really well is writing. He has supernatural stories and horror stories, but they always, at the root of them, they're about certain things that everybody can relate to, like grief, friendship. They explore that kind of, or the questioning of God's existence, or is there an afterlife? Or trying to find your place in the world. He really does, through the lens of horror most of the time. He explores these themes that everybody can relate to. So what else? I've read The Shining and Doctor Sleep. I just read last year. Either last year or earlier this year. No, I think it was last year I read it. I've read Salem's Lot, but I do plan to reread it this October, possibly. Or no, actually, I think I'm gonna read it this September because I'm reading all my horror and dark academia books in September. I'm gonna try to read them in September because I participate in Victober every year. Let's see what else. I've read it, but I did start a reread a while back. That's still my favorite of his works. And even despite that infamous scene that everybody questions his sanity on. And that scene will probably never make it to screen. I mean, to be fair, he was high when he wrote that. I think. But I guess for a lot of people that doesn't excuse it for writing such a disturbing scene. It's not even, it was unnecessarily disturbing. And if you haven't read it, look, you probably want to look it up. And then what else have I read by King? I've read 3 of the stories from 4 Past Midnight. The Longlers. That was the first short story of King's I ever read. I don't remember what was the first longer work by, I guess It, or maybe it was one of the Dark Tower books, which I've read the first 3 books. I started reading book 4 years ago, but then I put it down, and then it was a long time before I came back to it. So at the end of last year, I did start a reread of the series, because I figured it's been so long that I should go ahead and reread the books. So I've read the first 2 books in the Dark Tower series at the end of last year, and at some point this year I want to read The Wastelands and then Wizarding Glass, which I remember Wastelands being my favorite, especially because of the train, the creepy train. And what else have I read by King? Okay, so yeah, so it's time at 4 Past Midnight. I read The Longlers, and that'll be in the first one. First short story I ever read. I read The Sundog, and I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago when I read that one, and The Library Policeman, which was one of my favorites. So see, I always have, like I said, I have a complicated relationship with stories. Every so often I actually like them. I read all stories in Full Dark No Stars. That includes 1922, which was adapted on, I think, Netflix. And I just finished Firestarter. So in a way, this is a kind of a mini update on how I'm going with the Stephen King project. What else have I read? There's a lot, but I've also bought a lot by Stephen King as well. So I guess maybe that's why it feels like I've read a lot by King. But I actually think I really haven't. I've read his memoir on the craft. His writing memoir. I listened to that in an audiobook. Which that was very interesting. And even if you don't like Stephen King, his novels, you might like just listening to his memoir on writing, because that does give some really interesting advice. And it sounds like he really knows his stuff. You know, even if you don't like his stories, you might still like his memoir. And what else have I read? I can't think of what else. But he's probably number 1 in most read author. Okay, so next is one that I debated about putting on this list, because she's probably the least read, and that is Naomi Novik. With her, I've read basically all that she has out right now. I've read everything. I've read the Temeraire series, the first 4 books in the Temeraire series, not all of it. I'm gonna read Victory of Eagles soon. Maybe this September. Which is a really cute series. It takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, and it's the concept of dragons in the world, like if dragons still existed, and if they had existed then, as well as, medieval times. And our main character is the captain of a ship. He's a Navy captain, and they have infiltrated this fleet that is going to going to France to deliver an egg to Napoleon Bonaparte. And they infiltrate it, and Will Lawrence, our main character, he finds himself bonded to this dragon, whom he calls Temeraire. And Temeraire is so adorable. He's so curious. He's passionate. He really cares about his kind and wanting his kind to have rights. He wants to learn things. He's like a little puppy dog and a little child. A human child combined with a puppy dog. He's eager and just and really loyal and sweet, and just I love them. And I love his relationship with Will Lawrence, his loyalty, and although that's put to the test in book 2. But it's a really sweet series. There's 9 books altogether, but that you get through them quickly, I feel like. And then I've read Uprooted, still my favorite. I also read Spinning Silver, was not my favorite, but I still liked it. And then I read most of A Deadly Education, but I decided that it wasn't for me after her writing style in that particular book, I just could not get into. And it felt very telling and not showing. And the main character was just one of those characters that has this bad attitude because her life sucks, so she's angry and bitter about the world. And she ends up going, and it's in this world where people with magic get sent to this special school, and there's no teachers. There's no authority figures whatsoever. They just have to survive the school to graduate. Which that was an intriguing concept. And they have all these monsters coming after them, and and she is being constantly saved by the guy who's known as the hero of the school, and she is incredibly annoyed by that. Especially because she was told that she was cursed, that she's evil all her life. So she's a very angry person with a bad attitude. Now, there were other things in that book that were questionable, that she received Naomi Novik received a lot of criticisms, and I'm assuming, from what I've heard, I think she has changed those things, fixed those problems. And it wasn't necessarily technical stuff, it was stuff that people were not comfortable with. And, but I have no interest in reading book 2. It was an interesting concept, but I just couldn't get into it. So she's probably the author that I've loved the least from, out of at least these 7 people. Okay, so next is Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson. What can we say about him? He is just great. He doesn't have any flowery writing. His writing is probably just average, but it gets the point across. And he writes these fun story secrets, these intricate magic systems. He's such a fun writer. I mean, I even like the book that he wrote that people say is not his best, but was his first thing he ever wrote. But he published it later, and that's Elantris. So I've read that one. I really like that one. I've also read... sorry if you can hear that, my friend, my bestie Larissa's message is texting me, probably responding to my comments yesterday. And either that or my stupid phone is alerting me, or my don't forget to check. But I've read Skyward. I have not listened to or read the sequel, but I do want to at some point. But I don't know if I want to buy it, I ended up putting actually Skyward in the donation pile because I did enjoy it, but I don't know if I want to keep going with it. I mean, I might, and I would rather just get it off, maybe get it off Libby if I can. Although I think Libby only has the ebook so far. I don't know if it has the audiobook yet. And I've read Warbreaker. I really loved that one. I've read... I cannot believe we can't think... Not read that I've read. Let's see, what else have I read? Oh, Mistborn. Of course, Mistborn. The original trilogy. I've read that one. Let's see what else. And I do want to reread that one, but I kind of am hoping for, at some point, the UK covers, because I really like the white background and the simplistic designs on them. I really love that. But it's from the UK, so it's not going to be on many of my stores. I have to order it online. And I don't know if it's on Thrift Books. I need to check that and see if I can get thrift books. But although I don't know, because I imagine it's really very popular. I have not read the second era of Mistborn yet, and I started reading. I read most of The Way of Kings, but I have not read all of it yet. I haven't finished it because it's a pretty long book. I'm trying to, what else? Again, he's another author where I feel like I've read a lot more than I have. And maybe that's because I hear so much about Brandon Sanderson from all these other people, like Daniel Green and Elia Brooks and Reagan from Peruse Projects. I hear about him by those people all the time, so maybe it feels like I've read a lot more. And every time, it always frustrates me when people talk about the Stormlight Archives, and I'm like, I know, I need to get to it. I need to get back to The Way of Kings. And even though they're not talking to me, it still drives me crazy because it always makes me feel guilty. So I have to, like, mute it or, close my ears and, act all immature and try to ignore it. Act all childish and try to ignore it because it's gonna bug me. Which I know it's silly, but it's just, I'm weird. But I love Brandon Sanderson, like a lot of fantasy fans. I mean, there's probably a few that, there's probably some, of course, that think he's overrated or probably don't have no interest in getting into him. Okay, and then I've read, let me see, and Kate Morton, she was one of the first authors I ever really got into, and I've read all of her works so far, so I'm up to date on her works, but I want to reread them. So I did take out one of her books to reread this autumn, ideally in September. But so all of her works are The House at Riverton, The Clockmaker's Daughter is her newest one. Although I think she's already working on another one as we speak. Let's see if I can. It's not in view. I cannot see it. Dang it. I have it covered by another book. The Secret Keeper, Forgotten Garden. What is that one? Let me see. Okay. The Distant Hours. Sorry, I'm trying not to move too much because I got a wasp sting yesterday. So my leg is all swollen. So I have an ice pack, if you guys can see it. You can't see it. And I don't want to remove it because it's a loose ice pack. So it's I'm trying not to move too much because if I get up and walk around, then the ice pack is gonna fall off my leg. So, and actually I'm supposed to keep it elevated, but at the moment since I'm just filming this video, I'll worry about that when I go to sit at my computer, over on my desk because I have my computer right here. I'm filming. But yeah, so I don't want to move too much. But, so The Distant Hours, and I'm trying to think of what's one other ones. There's quite a few, but I cannot think of all their names yet. Let's see, so The Distant Hours, Secret Keeper, The Forgotten Garden, House at Riverton, The Clockmaker's Daughter. I feel like I'm missing some. Let me see. The Lake House. I think that's all of them. I think there's 6. Okay, so I think that's all of them. And I've read all of them. I was trying to reread the Forgotten Garden and The Distant Hours before I got to The Clockmaker's Daughter. But then I was just like, forgetting. Let me just go ahead and read The Clockmaker's Daughter. But I love her writing. I love her stories. They are, usually there are 2 timelines and a woman who's trying to just figure out a mystery, playing amateur detective. And sometimes she's connected to it, or sometimes she's like related to the people from the past, or she has met someone that's related to the people from the past. And usually something really horrible happened, someone died or something, and she has to piece together the events of what led to that. and they're, I just love them. And she's probably the only author, one of the few authors that I have. So yeah, I've read all of her works basically. Okay, and then last but not least, we have Gregory Maguire, and he's another author that I think, actually no, there is one thing I haven't read. And that's Lost, which is kind of a mixed with, with Ebenezer Scrooge meets what is his name? That famous serial killer. They just did the book on the women he killed. Famous British London murderer. I cannot remember his name. Can't think of his name, but that guy. They just did a nonfiction book about the the 5 women he killed, and how they weren't actually prostitutes, and kind of about their lives, and how this guy gets more attention than them, because he's like, even though he murdered them, he's a celebrity compared to them. But it's kind of inspired by him and Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol. It's called Lost. And I started to read it. Maybe I should have given it another chance. I think it's still, I have seen it at the roast office, the used bookstore. So I guess I could buy it, but I've read Wicked, Son of a Witch, and A Lion Among Men, but I never read Out of Oz, which is the last book that's part of a series, The Wicked Years. Basically, it's the origin story of the Wicked Witch, and what in book 2 is about her son, and book 3 is kind of about the Cowardly Lion and his origins and what happened to him after the events in Oz. And then Out of Oz, I don't know what that is about. I have to read the description, but I think it brings it all together. But I remember really liking those books. They were very different. And it's what the musical Wicked is about. And I read Mirror Mirror, which is a Snow White retelling, and takes place in Italy during the I think Italian Renaissance era with the Borgias. And they become her step family. And then you have Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, which is the Cinderella story, but it's focused on one of the stepsisters. And then you have I cannot remember what it's called, but it's a retelling of the Nutcracker, or like a origin story of the Nutcracker. So there's only one book by Gregory Maguire I have not read, and that was Lost. Which I guess I could buy that one, and like I said, I can always buy it. But I do plan to reread the Wicked Years series. I might buy the other two, Mirror Mirror and Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, which means basically I got rid of them and I decided to rebuy them. But it's like I'm always having, I feel this pressure to go through my books and pick ones that I want to give away that I'm no longer interested, but then all of a sudden I change my mind. Which is a little frustrating. But anyway, so those are my most read authors. What are some of your most read authors? I'd love to hear what those are in the comments below. If you like this video, please click subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you really like this video. I hope you're enjoying your reading and having a good having a good day, and I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.